Hello जी, क्या हाल है? Hope all of you well. So guys, this video is like the last video for a type of numbers, like the topical explanation of the concepts, and we're just going to be looking like two very special type of numbers that are there, and a lot of questions also come like in the past papers related to these two type of questions. So let's just look at those, and then let's just try and understand them very carefully, right? So rational numbers, all numbers that can be converted into fractions, like the numbers that are convertible to fractions are known as rational numbers. Like for example, like the rational number would be what? The rational number would be an integer. How is an integer a rational number? For example, if I say that 2 is a rational number, 4 is a rational number, 6 is a rational number, 8 is a rational number, because 2 over 1 could be is going to be equal to 2, 6 over 1 is going to be equal to 2, 6, and 8 over 1 is going to be equal to 8, right? So all these numbers, when they can have been expressed as what? As decimals and fractions, and that is not going to be an issue. Otherwise, what other type of rational numbers that could be there? We can, like, if we have to judge all the numbers, like if it is convertible to fractions or not. तो भाई हमने अभी जो दो डेसिमल्स पढ़े थे इस लास्ट वीडियो में, हमने क्या पढ़ा उसमें? वी लर्न दैट व्हाट आर रिकरिंग डेसिमल्स. रिकरिंग डेसिमल्स वो वाले थे जिनके नंबर्स भी सेम होते हैं और नेवर एंडिंग डेसिमल प्लेसेस होती हैं, लेकिन उनके नंबर या फिर उनके पैटर्न सेम होते हैं. लेकिन मैंने आपको उसके साथ ही एक बात बताई कि रिकरिंग डेसिमल्स कैन बी कन्वर्टेड इनटू फ्रैक्शंस, राइट? सो दैट मीन्स द अगर मैं बात करूं कि इंटीजर्स इज अ टाइप ऑफ अ rational number, so is recurring decimal. Recurring decimal is also a part of a rational number, like it's also a type of a rational number. And then what else could have been there? It would be terminating decimals. क्योंकि टर्मिनेटिंग डेसिमल्स पे भी अगर आप गौर करें तो टर्मिनेटिंग डेसिमल्स में क्या होता है कि वो वाले डेसिमल्स जो कि ख़त्म हो जाने वाले डेसिमल्स हैं वो भी बेटा जी फ्रैक्शंस में ख़त्म तो कन्वर्ट तो हो सकते हैं, तो इसीलिए बेटा वो भी हमारे पास क्या कराएंगे, वो भी हमारे पास रैशनल नंबर्स कराएंगे. इज दैट क्लियर गाइज? Hopefully this is clear, right? So now we know what rational numbers are. All numbers that can be converted into fractions. So it can be of integer, because there is a confusion about integers कि integer को fraction कैसे लिखूँ मैं? integer के नीचे अगर कुछ भी नहीं है तो 1 है, right? And then there could be a recurring decimal, because even though this is a decimal but it can be converted into a fraction. And then there can be terminating decimals as well, right? Because they वो खत्म हो जाने वाले decimal हैं तो उनको भी हम fractions में convert कर सकते हैं. So that means they can be expressed as like rational numbers, right? Okay, so we're just going to be looking at what irrational numbers are. So irrational numbers are what? Irrational numbers are all numbers that could be what? That could be just expressed as what? Okay, wait a second. Let me just fix this. We'll just look at irrational numbers. So irrational numbers are what? Irrational numbers are all the numbers that cannot be expressed as fractions. But we cannot express them as fractions, right? So the first thing that comes to our head was what? Was non-terminating decimals. Why non-terminating decimals? Because like the decimals could be divided into two parts, recurring or non-recurring. Recurring itself can be converted into fractions, so it's a rational number. But non-terminating itself is like can be converted into fractions, so it's a rational number. But when we come to non-terminating decimals, like the decimals that are never ending, so what happens is if they are never ending, so that means we don't know how to exactly convert them into a fraction, because they're not going to be exactly equal, because we don't know where the decimal places are going to stop और कितने decimals को कितनी places आगे लेके जाना है to make it a non-decimal number and to then convert it into a fraction, right? So irrational numbers, so this is going to be what? This is going to be not convertible. So this is going to be what? This is going to be not convertible to fraction. So if it's not convertible to fraction, then that means what? It is going to be what? It is going to be an irrational number, right? So irrational numbers are those which cannot be converted into fractions. So matlab, if you have to recognize an irrational number, so now it is going to be what? Recurring is a rational number because it can be converted into decimals, into fractions. In non-recurring, terminating is a rational number too because it can be converted into fractions. But like in non-recurring, non-terminating is not a rational number because it cannot be converted into a fraction, right? So guys, like there is a question that comes in your head that how to find out an irrational number, right? So let's just focus on that right now. So the question that is there that often like pops up, how to find an irrational number. So like randomly if you're sitting and if I ask you, okay, just tell me an irrational number. So what are we gonna do is we're gonna be looking at what? There's a rule for it, right? So a square root of a non perfect square number. Square root of a non-perfect square number is known as what? It is known as an irrational number. Is known as an irrational number, right? And how does that work, right? So let's suppose the smallest irrational number that could be there is going to be what? It's going to be under root square root of 2. Why not square root of 1? Because friend is a perfect square number. Its square root is not an irrational number, right? A square root 2, a square root 3, then square root 4 again not, then square root 6, square root 7, square root 8, then again square root 9 is not because 9 is a perfect square number, then square root 10 and square root 11 and square root 12. Okay, so why am I calling them irrational numbers? Because if you like put them inside a calculator, you will see that all of these square roots are like non-terminating decimals. So if they're non-terminating decimals, that means it's an irrational number, right? So this is how we find out an irrational number. Okay, so guys, this is it for like rational and irrational number, right? So now what am I gonna do is I'm just gonna be okay. Wait, let me just fix it, and let me just put it in the other like under the right number. Okay, yeah. So basically we have done irrational numbers as well. Now what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at a type of question that sits in an exam, right? How like state find all irrational numbers. So find all irrational numbers between 4 and 5, right? We need to do what? We need to find out all the irrational numbers between 4 and 5 that are there, right? And how are we going to do that? So like this is the exact question that comes in your exam. Like they may give you two numbers and they ask you to find all the irrational numbers that are there between them. So what I'm going to do is it's going to the step number one. Step number one in this case is what? In step one you just square both numbers, right? What is step 1 in this case? The step 1 in this case is to square both numbers, like जिसके बीच में हमें irrational numbers ढूंढने हैं, right? So it's going to be what? 4 square is going to be what? It's going to be 5 square, so it's going to be 16 and then 25. Now these two are the square numbers. We need to find irrational numbers between them. So between 16 and 25, all the numbers that are there between 16 and 25 are going to be non-perfect square numbers, right? So what are we going to do is, just to find out an irrational number between these two, we are going to square root all the numbers between 16 and 25, right? So what is step number 2? Step number 2 is what? Step number 2 is square root all the numbers between the two square numbers, right? They're gonna do what? We're gonna square root all the numbers between these two square numbers, and they are going to be an irrational number, right? So guys, this is how it is going to be worked out. Like this is what we'll have to do to find out the square number between any like irrational number between two numbers, right? What are we going to do? Whatever those two numbers are, just square them both, right? Let's just find their perfect squares. And then you do what? Between those two numbers, all the numbers are going to be such that if you square root them, it is always going to be an irrational number, right? So like square rooting all the numbers between the two square numbers from between whom we have to find out an irrational number from, right? तो हमने जिन दो नंबर्स के बीच में irrational number ढूंढना था उन दोनों को स्क्वायर किया इन दोनों को स्क्वायर करने के बाद जो भी नंबर्स इनके बीच में आ रहे हैं वो परफेक्ट स्क्वायर्स नहीं होंगे, क्योंकि यही दो नंबर्स परफेक्ट स्क्वायर्स हैं. तो all these middle numbers are going to be irrational numbers, and this is what we are going to be doing, guys. So this is the last video for the type of numbers, and we have done all the 18 type of numbers that are there, right? Now from the next video we're going to be solving beautiful questions of this topic, where we learn on how to look at these questions that involve type of numbers, right? So guys, that's all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.